Only mode.
Hello and welcome to our Preparing to Build, Selecting Your Building Committee webinar, the first of two dealing with selecting and structuring your building committee for your project. I'm Marshall Shannon with Ministry Design Concepts, and we provide the webinars on ministrydesigntraining.com that allows you the opportunity to gain information through our webinars. I want to be able to help you today begin to understand guidelines for selecting the right people, put on the right committee or subcommittee for your building project, your renovation project, your relocation project, whatever your particular situation is, to help you understand how to get the right people on board. Failure to do so can hinder, if not stall out, your project, along with making the journey not as pleasant. You want to be effective and efficient as a church, and you want your building process to go smoothly as possible, and to be able to meet the challenges that you're surely going to meet. Then you need to have the right players on your team. So this is about selecting the right building committee team members to serve on your project. First, to show you, there are 5 phases to any building project: preparation, planning, design, construction, and facility management. You can't really leave any of these out and be effective as a ministry when it comes to your facilities. Today we're going to focus on the preparation. What we talk about is to be done on the front end of your project. And the good news is that during the preparation and planning, while the value of it is severe, it's been stated that proper planning is what causes you to be able to succeed. If you don't plan well, you can't spend well. And it will prohibit, proper planning prohibits poor performance. And so in order for you to do this, understand that the cost, the money you're spending, goes up as you move through the steps in the journey. And the control of the project, you release it to the industry professionals or to those who are carrying out your decisions. Once you release those decisions, they're no longer in your hands. Somebody else is carrying them out. That you'd better prepare and plan well if you hope to succeed in your building project. What comes first? When you think about selecting the right people for your building project, what comes first? And I would say first, I would ask, is your ministry design intact? Is it in place? Do you have everything in order? Have you thought through how your ministry is functioning and what form does it take? Were you following a model and then adjusting it, or did you create your own ministry design from scratch? Is it in place? Here's several questions. First off, let's visit the idea of your core values. Do you have your core values? Core values are the constant, passionate, biblical beliefs that drive your ministry. There are 5 vital elements in this definition. Core values are constant. They're tenacious. They dictate your congregation's behavior. Values do change, but very slowly and perhaps seldom, but they're constant. They're tenacious about it. They're there. They're not going anywhere. Values, secondly, are defined as passionate. They describe what you are deeply and feel strongly about. So what you care deeply about and feel strong about. Your true values connect strongly with your emotions. Thirdly, values are biblical. They're not outside of God's economy. core values are core beliefs. And then values is drive the ministry. So, why are core values so important to your church? As we define them as constant, passionate, biblical, and they are the core beliefs and they drive your ministry. You need to discover them and develop them and have them accepted by the church family where they buy in and agree with them, because they determine your ministry distinctive. They dictate personal involvement of the people in your ministry. They communicate what is important to you. Values embrace good change. In other words, if you're vetting a ministry idea, whether or not to do it or not to do it, or to change it, adjust it, amend it before carrying it out, you're going to ask the question, does that particular ministry idea or change agree with or contradict our beliefs as a ministry? Does it violate what you believe are important to God? Core values influence overall behavior. They inspire people to action. For instance, out of my own personal life, I came to the understanding that every human being is going to live one of two places for eternity, heaven or hell. Well, that core value, the value of a soul, has driven me to invest my life wholeheartedly in full-time ministry. I'm chasing and pursuing souls for Jesus. Well, that's a core value for me personally. And you need to understand that it inspires people to action, to invest their time, talent, and other resources, their treasures, in a particular cause if you have the right values. Values enhance credible leadership. They contribute to ministry success. They determine ministry mission and vision. And so as you have them discovered, and there are several different kinds of core values. There's ones that are declared and undeclared. They're conscious or they're unconscious. There's shared versus unshared values. There's personal versus organizational values. There's actual versus aspirational values, things that you aspire to. There's single versus multiple values. There's corporate versus departmental values and there's good versus bad. So as you look at this and discover your core values, you want to make certain that you understand how it's going to influence, because you're going to build your mission and your vision in agreement with and on the foundation of what you believe are the important things to God. Secondly, your mission is going to be defined. And that mission answers the question, what are we supposed to be doing? Mission dictates the ministry's direction. Mission formulates the ministry's function. You've got to define what matters. And you've defined what matters by your core values that you have discovered, identified them, developed them, and accepted them. And now you're going to take your mission and you're going to define what matters as help you decide, what are we supposed to be doing? What function does the organization exist to perform? What is the primary or main thing God has called us to accomplish? What are we attempted to do for God and our people? In short, what matters most? The mission of your church should be an expression of strategic intent. It summarizes the church's biblical task, and it defines the results it seeks to obtain. No mission, no future. If you don't have your mission intact, then you can't really move to vision clarity and buy-in by the congregation. And you need to make certain that your vision has three characteristics. Number one, is it clear? Do people understand the vision? Does it make sense to them? When asked, Can the people who attend your church clearly state the vision? Why don't you do this? Test it. Ask 10 different people about the vision of the church. Their responses will help you clearly understand if the vision is clear. Number 2, not only does it need to be clear, it needs to be compelling. Does the vision connect people's hearts to the heart of God? Is the vision urgent? Is it vital? Are the people personally drawn to it to invest in it? It's not just a corporate ideal, but a vision they see that they can personally buy into and invest their life in. Are they compelled to participate? Do they just feel like they have to take and make this a priority? If your ministry does not have a compelling vision, it may explain why you have such a small percentage of your people actively engaged in ministry. If you want to increase that percentage and get more gifted people invested and involved in your ministry, ask God to make clear His compelling vision for your ministry. Thirdly, is it crisp? One might say, is it concise? Is your vision tweeterable? Can you say it in 140 characters or less? Is it repeatable? If a member from your church runs into an unchurched friend at Starbucks and is asked what type of church they attend, could they answer in a short, crisp manner? Is it concise? Not rambling. Not you read it and it's vague, but something that is clear, compelling, and crisp. I would tell you to make certain that your ministry design is in place so that you're able to clearly communicate what's important to you as a church, what you're supposed to be doing as a church, and where you're headed, your destination as a church. Because based on this, you're going to need to create a game plan, a strategic plan, and implement it. And failure to do so is, how are you going to carry out your mission if you don't have a plan that allows you to do that? And so you need to have a clear game plan that answers the how, the what, the who, the when, the where, and what you expect to accomplish by your strategic game plan. And if you don't have that created and in place where you're implemented it, it's one thing to have a game plan that's written out in a little notebook or a big notebook. It's another thing to implement it, to put it into action. And then you need to be monitoring, measuring, evaluating what you measure, and adjusting the game plan as you go. Failure to do this, failure to do any one of these steps breaks the process down, and then you won't be able to move ahead as you ought to move ahead. And so continuing this thought, to summarize it, is your ministry model, your values, your mission, your vision, your game plan, and your implementation of that game plan, is how your ministry is designed and put together, adequately developed, so that you can see as you look down the road what is coming next in two ways. One is to have a ministry model that is set up for the aging process of your church. So as your church gets older, what things need to change and what things do you need to do in order to provide for it so it can continue to mature and to carry out its purpose. Let's go to a parenting example. My wife and I have reared 2 sons. They did not stay in their diapers from the time they were born to the time they got married and now have their own children. They did not wear, infant toddler clothes and made the clothes bigger for them when they got into K4. They did not wear the same anything, and their activities changed. Their taking responsibility for themselves. I didn't continue making their bed up for them every morning until they got out of the house. I did not decide and tell them what to wear, but when they were little we did. But as they aged, things changed. Churches, as bodies of believers, also are to experience change. And if you don't forewarn your congregation what the expected, normal, routine changes are for your particular church family, they are going to resist that. Do any of you remember the pacifier and having to take the pacifier out of your child's hands and the fit that it caused? Would not it have been easier as the child grew and you denied them certain things that they needed to stop doing and helped them start doing new things? That's all a part of the aging process. Your church family may pitch a fit if you have not properly prepared them for the changes that have to come about in order for them to age and mature correctly as a church family. Secondly, is that you want to look at a ministry model that is developed for the growth process. Just as you get older and changes come about naturally in a church model, also as you grow in number, there are changes that have to come about that allow you to continue growing. In order to get your church healthy and fit for the next building project, you need to understand how that church is going to age and how that church family is going to grow, and prepare them for the changes that are a natural part of their church aging and growing in number. If you are successful to live and have a healthy church that is growing in size, you're reaching more people with the gospel and you're discipling them, there's going to come about through that, and you can help everyone's expectation can be in the know and buy into what's coming next. They will know that as you grow and you get toward 50, 60% full in your auditorium, that you need to begin planning and pulling together a strategic plan to figure out what you're going to do to alleviate the growth problem as you get toward 80% full. Because if you go beyond 80%, and for your church it may be 78% or it may be 85%, but a place where in your context it plateaus out or starts to go up and down like a roller coaster in your attendance. Before you get there, you need to be telling them, this is what we're going to do to prepare for that day. And you come out with a way to manage the growth and manage the space dynamics to allow your church to maintain momentum while you're growing and while you're building. If those that you select to be on the building committee understand this, then they're going to, after you've identified and prepared them to understand the changes that need to happen in order for your ministry to move forward, you're managing and getting the benefits of several things at one time. And one of them is that you're not going to have the argument about whether or not it's time for you to add new space. They've already adopted your philosophy of ministry, your values, mission, vision, and strategic plan, and they've been a part of the decision-making process to identify, discover, develop, and have bought into those things. And so they're looking at your ministry model and saying, hey, Pastor, where are we in this? Isn't it about time for us to be talking about adding a fellowship area, a more educational space, or another worship venue, or to start that second church or third church, or for us to be looking at relocating? We're outgrowing this, and we want a multi-venue, and so we want to have multi-site. Whatever your model is, that you have shown them a timeline with the changes as you age and grow, and how the church changes in its structure, in its family, in its polity, in how you make decisions and who makes decisions and when they make decisions. All these different things are a part of your ministry master plan to assist you with moving your ministry forward. And when leaders don't understand their own ministry model, how do you expect the common man in the pew, who is not in charge and not privy to the inner workings of your church family, make this public? Now, moving from your ministry design and having it in order and answering the question, is our ministry design intact? Are the pieces together? Are we healthy and fit? Are we fit enough? Are we fit enough to take on the sifting that is going to come about as we look to build a new building? And you've got to determine that as you develop, first off, the purpose of your committee. Decide what the mission of your particular building committee will be. Have the mission defined, the purpose defined. What are they trying to accomplish? Tell them. A sample statement, one that's been used, is they exist to develop facilities that will accomplish the established goals and objectives within the financial plan of the church. That's just a fancy way to say that they're trying to make certain that the needs of the church are built within the financial capability or the wallet of the church. So what you want to build needs to be weighed with your wallet, what you can afford to build and what you should invest in it. But their goal is to determine what is mission critical, what that looks like, and then have a building designed that helps you accomplish what is mission critical. So, and you have to do it within your financial capabilities. Don't design something that cannot be built. The selection of your committee comes next, and this is what we want to talk about. If you don't have the preparation put together with your ministry design, and you cannot clearly articulate the purpose of the building committee, and we'll talk in the next webinar about the structure of your committee, so that they know what they're doing and how they're to do it and who is to do it, then you're going to have a hard time selecting the people to fit the job description. Character. Well, you want to ask, how do they live out their faith under pressure? When they are sifted, when they faced the testing times of life, how are they dealing with it? How well do they live out their faith when tested? And you want to be able to help them determine how to live out their faith. Well, how are they doing? You want to look at their conduct. Secondly, overall lifestyle, their Christ-likeness. You say, well, they're living out their faith, but when you look at the aroma of the person, how well are they doing there? Do people trust and admire them? Do people trust and admire them? It's already understood that they need to fully agree with the core values, what's important to the church, the mission of church, what you as a church, why do you exist? What are you trying to accomplish? The vision of the church. We understand that the purpose of the church and every believer, according to 1 Corinthians, that whatsoever I eat or drink, do it all to the glory of God. But within the church, there is a mission of that organization, that group of people. It is to be understood that they give full agreement to what's important to the church, what's mission critical to the church, what you're supposed to be doing, the vision of the church, where you're headed, the direction, and the game plan, how you're carrying out the mission of the church to accomplish the vision based on what you believe is important to you and to God. So their character, though, is that you want to pick people who have shown themselves to be able to be tested in their faith, and their faith grew and got stronger, because you're probably going to face times of sifting as you go through a building process. There are lots and lots of challenges. We always, as churches, seem to have more needs and wants than we do money. Time. We may find other things are working against us. It is important that we look not only at their character, but their capability. What skill sets do they have? Where do they thrive? One example of approach to this is their people management. People who are on the executive building committee, the ones who are going to be authorized to make decisions or bring information to the church family or to the elders to have those decisions approved, they need to manage people well, because they're each fixing to have be chair of a subcommittee or subcommittees who are going to break down the components of what you're trying to do and do the research and pull the resources together, and they're going to make recommendations, and that person on the committee needs to be able to manage people. They need to be able to communicate. They need to have common sense. They need to know how to plan. Along with their capabilities, you need to look at their chemistry. Will their shape, the way that they're put together, their place and shape, blend well with other committee members? You are wise to understand personality profiles and how those people are put together. Who works well together so that you can build a team, and there are tools that can help you do this. One sample approach is to look at their shape. I'm sharing this, not telling you it's for you, but that it's one way of doing this. Shape, the S stands for spiritual gifts. The H stands for their heart, their passions. What is important to them? Where do they thrive? What causes them to stay up late and read? What causes them to invest their Saturday mornings or their Sunday afternoons? What causes them to do these things? What are they passionate about? Their abilities, their skill sets. When you blend this group of people together, are they going to work well together and complement each other in their personality, their gifts, their abilities, their passions, and their experience? You're creating an important elite group of people who need to be willing to face and have faced life's testing times, to be sifted. They need to have capabilities, and then they need to be able to work together well with the other members of the executive building committee. Tools for determining a person's shape. I'm telling you to do this, but then I want to give you the tools to do it. You can look at placeministries.org. These folks can help you for a fee, of course, but to test, and it will give you their place, for them, PLACE, but it's basically the same setup as SHAPE. All right? You can use another one, is Assess Me. And of course, you can always go and Google this and find Christian organizations, or other organizations, but Christian organizations that will look at all the components of how a person is put together, to help you look at some objective as well as subjective, so you can vet the people. You need to evaluate the people you think you might put on the committee. You need to evaluate them before you enlist them, so you can equip them for ministry and engage them in serving on your committees. A written one, a book, is Shape, Finding and Fulfilling Your Unique Purpose for Life by Eric Ries. He's out of Rick Warren's church and did, I believe, his staff, and he took basically what Rick deals about in the purpose-driven church and the purpose-driven life, and he takes and puts that into place to help us as leaders vet and determine, evaluate who is best suited to serve together for a particular task. You can use Strength Finders by Tom Rath. The selection of your building committee, I would suggest, along with looking at their character, along with looking at their capabilities, along with looking at their chemistry, that you also take a look at a covenant. And what I mean by covenant is you need to develop a covenant for your committee members that defines, describes, and explains their commitment to the committee, to the church, and to the process. Let them know what is being required of them. Don't ask them to make a decision about joining it without helping them vet themselves for that committee. You're better off to wait and to go through the grueling process of talking to lots of people before you determine who God wants on that committee. But you want a covenant so that you're trying to eliminate misunderstandings about what they thought was required of them, expected of them, and the work they were going to have to perform by writing the job description, defining, describing, and explaining the commitment that they are making when they sign on the dotted line. This is not the only place in your ministry design that you ought to be doing this. You ought to have this done with your other ministries, from the leadership down to the core workers who are actually hands-on doing the work with your children and teens and singles and adults and your senior citizens and so forth. That in every aspect of your ministry, people need to know what the structure is and what's required of them. God is kind enough to tell us in the Word. And so you go back to the Word of God and you use the scriptures that deal with 1 Timothy 3 on pastors and elders and deacons, servants, or you go to Exodus 18 and look at the able men who Moses selected and put in to oversee the decisions, judgments made daily in different sizes, that you find in Acts, the men who were picked to oversee caring for the widows, the underprivileged and so forth in that text, and you look at the qualities and you try and follow the pattern so that you can properly select your building committee, having a covenant where they give written agreement to, and you hammer this out. You're trying to head off problems down the road by being too vague, by literally defining, describing, and explaining what their duties are. The selection of your building committee leadership, so that they know, the individual leaders. And as I said, if you structure this, and we'll get to this in another webinar dealing with structuring your building committee, but if you follow one structured pattern, that you have an executive building committee who are 3, 5, 7, or 9 members who are the decision-making body. They're pulling the trigger and are authorized to make decisions in behalf of the church family within a budget, so they have a clearly defined parameters of what they can do, where they can go, and how much they can spend, and the decisions they can make. But they're an executive committee. Then each one of those executive committee members is going to head up 1, 2, or maybe 3 subcommittees where you're going to evaluate and enlist and equip other church family to work during the process of planning and preparation, design and construction, and facility management, that these different subcommittees are engaged all along the line, serving, perhaps heavily engaged for a short period of time. Previous to that, doing research and pulling together resources and giving the information through that executive committee member who chairs those subcommittees, so that the executive committee is putting together the information into a cohesive, coherent, orchestrated game plan for building your building. There's lots of hard decisions to make. Priorities have to be set. What are we going to build this time? What gets to be included and what has to be excluded? Well, the selection of your building committee leadership involves more than just the chairman of your executive building committee, but understand that in this process, in this structure, each committee member is leading other groups. And so you want to develop your leadership covenant that is goes right along with your committee meeting, building committee covenant, and make them understand what is their commitment. And then develop your leadership roles. What is their contribution? They're going to be organizing, delegating, and supervising other people. They need to know this up front. Make it understood so they can agree to follow and to do what they're supposed to do. Develop your leadership standards, their capabilities. If they look at themselves and you look at them and say, nope, they cannot, don't let the Peter principle come into place, where you put them one level up in the organization beyond their competency. Do they work well with people? Is anyone following them now? Don't pick leaders that no one is being influenced by, that has no one following them. A problem solver. There are plenty of people to cause problems. Are they gifted at resolving issues or creating issues? Are they a delegator? Will they assign duties to the right people on the team? Can they put together their own team? Are they a manager? Will they follow up on what they delegate? Can they manage people well? Are they a communicator? Will those following correctly understand them? So the person needs to be clear and concise as to what he is saying about job descriptions and duties, responsibilities, deadlines, timelines, and how the work is to be put together and exactly what the person is supposed to do. You need capable people. Then there are qualifications. Biblical explanation. What does a qualified leader look like? Well, you've got plenty of them in Scripture to pull from to extract what does a leader look like. Explain it to them. Give them examples. Exhortations. Why are you vetting a potential leader? Why is this important? Use the opportunity to explain what a leader looks like, and then exhort them so you're vetting those who are being considered. And then biblical examples. Which kind of leader will they be? It'd be a good exercise for you to go through the Scriptures and to put this together for your ministry design. Biblical explanations, exhortations, and examples of qualifications for leaders. Resource. Here's one that you can use to develop leaders. Strengths-based leadership. Now, I will tell you that on our website, ministrydesignconcepts.com, there is a tab at the top for book reviews. If you'll click on it, it will take you to 8 categories with 32 subcategories in those 8 categories. And you'll be able to click on it and look at different books that we have vetted to put on our website to help you in one way. They're often over 100 of the 300 books have a pretty clear review defining, telling you what's in the book. But there is a caption to help you. You click on a book, and it will take you to Amazon.com, and you can review their reviews there. You can look at the cost of it, whether to buy a hard copy, hardback, paperback, Kindle version of the book. You can look at the reviews, and it will help you vet. So don't let this be the only thing you go to, but use our website. It's free tools and free access to get to the tools that you need to develop this. The structure of your building committee. Stop and think for a moment, and this is just a flyover overview. So we're going to go through the process and look at it. You've got to have organizational structure of your building committee, your subcommittees, and even your work groups that work underneath your subcommittees. And sometimes it involves pulling in certain industry professionals who come in, and while they're enlisted by the church, they're working with the subcommittees or the work groups underneath the subcommittees to help them understand how they are to work together. There's operational considerations in your structure. Duties, deadlines, and a chain of command. How does a person and who does a person and when does a person and what does a person do who is on the committee? You have work to do in the preparation stage to structure your building committee so that you don't have the problem that you have in Numbers, where at the end of that book, in the 29th chapter, the 29th to 30th verse, you have Moses writing and saying every man was doing that which was right in their own eyes. Define for them the structure that they're to work under. Tests were done years ago. Don't know who did it, just was taught about it. They did a test, research test, that took a group of early elementary age students, put them on a playground that was surrounded by 4 streets. A square playground. They had no fences. They had supervisors there, but the kids played under that situation in the middle of the playground. When they put fences up, barriers up all the way around, the kids played from corner to corner, side to side, fence to fence, because they knew what the boundaries were, and they were clearly marked, and they felt safe, and they could be productive, and they could play together within the boundaries. Organizationally and operationally, you want to give to your people who you evaluate and enlist in the process, equip and engage to do the work of the project. You need to answer these important questions. There are options that you can follow. If you're a small church, you may not need a bunch of subcommittees. It really depends. You can narrow down to make the structure fit the size of your church. Medium-sized churches, 200 and down would be small churches. At least that's how consultants for the last 3 decades, they've kind of qualified 150 to 200. Medium churches would be 200 to 400, some say to 500. It really depends on who you ask. But nonetheless, catch the point that small churches, you have options about how you structure it so it's not overstructured, over-detailed, and just causes the gears to grind to a halt. Medium-sized churches, it needs to be appropriate, the organizational and the detailed and the number of people involved. There's going to be more involved depending on the small, medium, or large church being over 400 or 500. I'm not even going to get into the mega churches where you've got extra large and extra large and so forth that are involved in this, to how you structure it. The scope of the project. You can have a small church, and hear me out with this, who has average giving of 200 people with an average annual giving of $1,000 per person, or $200,000 of annual income. When you run them through what they can afford, 2 to 2.5 times $200,000 would be $200,000 to $500,000 that they can afford to borrow from a bank or some kind of lender. If they do a capital campaign in-house or with an outside consultant, it's going to be 60% of their annual giving, up to 2 times. Wouldn't plan on 3 or 4 times your annual giving with an outside consultant. 2 times is probably the national average right there at that. When you begin to take what a small church can afford, you've got the scope of the project, that $400,000 to $500,000 for borrowing, $400,000 for fundraising over 3 years, and if you've been saving money, you take that minus any debt, and you've got your affordability, a quick affordability analysis of your church. And a small church may have a smaller scope project, but if it is something that has, let's say you're building a fellowship hall, and you want to put a kitchen in there, whether it's a warming kitchen or a full commercial kitchen, And in order to do that, you may end up with lots and lots of people involved who are just helping you plan what your function is right now in your kitchen, or the one that you plan to do, so you know how to design the kitchen space to allow you to do what you're going to do in the kitchen space or plan to do in the kitchen space. And so the scope of that project, while it may be a smaller project under $1 million for that fellowship hall, that a fair portion of that's going to be the kitchen. And if you're going to put a full functioning commercial kitchen in there, if you could find a way to do that in a small project, you still have to decide how you're going to serve the food, how you're going to prepare the food, how you're going to store the food, how you're going to store the equipment, what equipment you're going to have in there, dishwashers and refrigerators and freezers and stoves and ovens and microwaves and toaster ovens and bun warmers and all these different things that you would possibly have in a commercial kitchen today. Well, again, you've got to look at the structure of your building committee needs to match the scope of your project. Does that make sense to you? The structure of your building committee should match the scope of the project, because you can end up so detailed in a small project in a small church that it just grinds it to halt, because people are too confused or burdened with the complexity of your detailed reporting that you're doing. Make it match. And so this is just a quick overview of how you are going to select the right people. You've got to have your ministry design in place with all the components. You've got to clearly define and agree upon the purpose of the committee. Why are you putting it together? Then you've got to define the job description of each person there and select the right people to be on the right committees in your project, for your project. Failure to do any of these things is going to pardon the expression, but hogtie you and your project. And my guess is, and I have no real research data to prove this, but my guess is from observing this over the last 10 years that 70% of the time when a church wishes to build, feels it needs to build, desires to build, that 70% and up, more than 70% of the time, they fail. And so if you want to keep from tripping and stumbling along your journey to build your building, you need to get your game plan together with your ministry design, who you want to be on there, and what you're going to have them to do before you begin to evaluate the people and enlist them and equip them and engage them in the work of the ministry for this. And so we want you to stop and think through the selection of your building committee so that you don't stumble by putting the wrong people in the wrong place doing the wrong duties. Trust the Lord will bless your efforts, and we look forward to your attending our next webinar on the structure of your building committee.